All right, I'm going to get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be discussing quick customer experience wins for insurers. I have some amazing panelists today with experts from GhostDraft, Novarica, Hartford Mutual, and Sapiens. My name is Layla Muth, and I'm the Director of Pre-Sales for GhostDraft, and I will be the moderator for today's panel discussion. Now, before we begin, I do want to mention that the panel will be taking your questions at the end of the webinar. We have a live Q&A session that's going to be up. So throughout the discussion, feel free to send in your questions. There's a chat window. You can do it there, and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. Also, this is being recorded, so you can expect to receive the video in your inbox within the next couple of days. Okay, so now before we jump into the panel discussion itself, let's talk about a hot topic in insurance right now, and that's customer experience. So in a competitive insurance market where price often dominates the purchase decision, customer experience has become a differentiator. Almost half of insureds stay with their company say that they did so because they had a good customer experience. So carriers who deliver a great customer experience are going to be driving retention, brand advocacy, and revenue. As evidence, a McKinsey study found that carriers who provided consistently superior customer experiences created 2 to 4 times more new business and a 30% higher profitability than their peers over a 5-year period. That's why 70% of insurance CEOs are prioritizing and investing in customer experience over the next 12 months. So 2021 is on the horizon. It is looming, and there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going to happen. That is why it's really important for us to be able to focus on some quick customer experience wins. All right, so let's do this. Let's meet our panel. They're excited to give us their insights and experience, and we're joined by 4 industry experts. Let's do a quick introduction. First up, we have Tim Baum. He's the Vice President and CIO at Hartford Mutual Insurance. Next, we have Tom Benton. He is the VP of Research and Consulting at Novarica. We have my friend John Pettit. He is the Chief of Property and Casualty Product and Business Strategy at Sapiens. And finally, our very own Angie Nguyen. She's the Vice President of Business Development and Alliances at GhostDraft. Okay. Introductions are out of the way. Let's get started with some questions for the panel. Okay, so to truly kick off any customer experience discussion, you really have to start with customer expectations. So Tim, how have you seen insured expectations change, and what behaviors do you expect are going to stick around beyond 2020?
I think one thing that we all recognize is with the pandemic or COVID, we've all been forced to work differently. And so the expectations of what we need and how we work have been thrust upon individuals that may have not been comfortable previously in doing things digitally or electronically, but now they've been forced to do it. So we're seeing a lot of adoption in that digital realm, from going from paper into digital, receiving things digitally. The expectation really is things need to be electronic. People need to be able to get them anywhere. So whether they're in the office, in the home, remote, they need to receive that information anywhere. And the information needs to be timely and fast so that they can get that information and turn around quickly, because being electronic, you also can move that information a lot faster. We deal directly with agents, independent agents. Those agents have the relationship with the insured. So getting that information communicated through the chain, we've got to do it even more timely, and there's the expectation of doing that more timely, just because people now are comfortable with this whole remote concept and doing things electronically, whether through video or just email communications or dynamic communications, that a lot of people now are being comfortable starting to adapt to because of what's been thrust upon them.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could add in then that, like Tim was saying, all customers became online customers in 2020, and basically we had a crash course on what it meant to become an online customer for a lot of people. And we've all had new experiences with multiple digital channels and with customer journeys that have been refined outside of insurance and other sectors, especially in retail. Companies like Amazon, Walmart, Target, they've all stepped up their game in 2020 to provide new capabilities and make it easier for customers to interact online with their providers. And that includes insurers. Insured policyholders have an increased expectation that they're going to have a better experience with their insurers. So personalization, better understanding of their needs, and also less tolerance of friction in the process. So by that I mean they're not going to tolerate things like having to input their information more than once. Like that we're all experienced with, and we find annoying in bad customer journeys. They want an omni-channel approach that can tend to be very difficult for insurers to manage. And like Tim mentioned, a lot of insurers consider their agents to be their main customer. So insurers need to have found that they've needed this year to find better digital support, ways of better digitally supporting their agent. The agents are now more focused on digital communications and improving the digital submission intake.
And Tom, to that point, you talked a lot about the insurers. On the agent side, with the democratization of data, the agents also are in that same, when they're inputting information into a system. If you already know all that information, it's public information, why do I need to rekey that in? Can't you? Yeah. It's not going to be unacceptable to have individuals enter information that they know is publicly available. That's going to take them time to do that. It needs to be that, as you mentioned, that frictionless experience.
All right, anybody else want to join in on this? Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like you've given some really excellent insights into those future behaviors and expectations. So as you're aware, there are countless channels for insurers to interact with customers. More and more of them are being added all the time. So John, what tips or recommendations do you have for people who are building a channel management strategy? Hold on a second. Missing your volume for some reason.
Okay.
Here we go.
All right, a little technical difficulty makes it real. All right, so relating back to what Tom was saying about the omni-channel experience that people are expecting to have, you know, the one challenge that I've seen with a lot of organizations that are starting to become more aware of they need to be able to have this omni-channel presence is that in an omnipresent atmosphere, all of a sudden, sometimes you can wind up creating confusion to the customer. And so whether that be, okay, I can interact with somebody on Facebook, or I can interact with them directly on my web channel, or I can interact with them some other way. If they don't have a clear course in terms of doing the things that they want to do it very quickly, then that confusion actually really goes against the ability to improve that customer service, right? Because now their experience is, look, it took me a while to figure out how to get there, as opposed to I can go to one place, whether it be navigating from those other channels directly, without having to go and click and find these things. But I think that degree of confusion is something that people have to deal with. I think a lot more insurers that are actually getting into this, they're in a rush right now, right? They're responding to the particular atmosphere that we're in. And so sometimes some of these things aren't thought out. Some senior executives said, we got to get out there. And you know what? Their folks are going to get them out there. But they really need to think through how that interaction is going to be holistically consumed by that consumer at the end of the day, because otherwise it's going to affect your brand.
Yeah. Angie, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think John is exactly right. The number of channels available for communication has just exploded in the last few years. And the ability to manage and orchestrate a message across, we kind of think about them as the known channels, you know, so our traditional channels of print and email and sending PDFs, that kind of thing, and then the unknown or the social media and other channels where your messaging is really more one-to-many as opposed to one-to-one. The coordination of that message across all of those channels really has to be considered. I've seen a few examples where not only was the message not coordinated, but it was actually opposition to each other. You were seeing one type of message in one channel and something totally different coming through in a different channel. And you could just tell that was, different departments in the large organization who weren't looking at this holistically. I think another thing that can help with that is having technology that allow you to control all of those channels. If you can centralize that from a technology perspective, it helps you align your business processes, because if the technology is the hub of all communications, then the people who are orchestrating that will realize, oh, we need to make sure that this message is consistent across both our print, mail, email, all the way through to social media channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just following up on that, I think one thing, well this is, you can't appreciate the role that marketing now has had to take in this new environment, because as you're saying, there are multiple channels, and there's the print, there's the email, there's the social media. How do you make sure that you've got that consistent message across all those channels? And it's usually the marketing person that's trying to craft that message for you and polish that message so that it's consistent. So it's even, I think, actually putting a burden not only on the IT to have the infrastructure and the tools to do it, but also on that marketing side to come up with those messages and make sure those messages actually are accurate, working with the business to say, how do I need to communicate this across all the channels, knowing that there are nuances within those channels of how you want to articulate certain things depending on that channel you're in, but make sure that it's consistent. So
Exactly.
I think that's, there's actually a really large role for marketing to make sure that you have that consistent message out there.
Absolutely. So it sounds like we've got some really good actionable things that we can do to sort of build that comprehensive channel management strategy. So I know we've mentioned it once or twice already, but let's go a little bit deeper into COVID-19, because we know we've had a huge impact on the industry. And one of the most significant is that demand for digital from customers of demographics that we haven't seen that demand in previously. So I'm going to throw it back to you again, Tim. What opportunities do new digital customers present to insurers?
I think John kind of alluded a little bit to this when you start talking about, the Walmart or the Amazon or what out there. People expectations have totally changed. You're bringing new individuals into the market. So there's new digital customers, which you typically, before COVID, you wouldn't think grandma or grandpa was a digital customer. But now grandma and grandpa, they're having Zoom meetings with the grandkids. Instead of having the 5-year-old teach them how the iPhone works, they're actually starting to teach the 5-year-old how the iPhone works, because they've gotten exposed to it. So there are new digital customers out there that traditionally you would think wouldn't be those customers because of the demographics of it. But this COVID really has changed things. So you're bringing different audiences into it that are having different experiences and different historical ideas of how things should function. So how do you marry kind of bringing those traditional expectations into that digital aspect so that you can give them a better experience utilizing technology, but yet they're still comfortable in using that technology? So whether it's with the interface, whether it's with how you communicate, because also communication, if I'm talking to you, but you're not receiving my message, I'm not communicating to you. So how do I make sure that when I do communicate to you, you're actually hearing what I'm saying and understanding what I'm saying, and how can I get that feedback back to you? So having channels out there and tools out there that when these new digital customers come on, and they're already here, there's already that expectations. Previously, from an agent perspective, you'd hear a lot of information about how agencies, it's the older individuals that run the agencies. There's going to slowly be a turnover to the younger ones. It's going to be time for the younger ones because they're more, mobile, adapt, they're going to do it. Well, all of a sudden now you've got these agents that might be 67 years old that are kind of like, oh, you know what? I get why the 30-year-old person I just hired is saying we got to go this way. We got to go this way. And it's really even pushing the agencies to start, for lack of better words, modernizing and how they're doing it. And I think it's really starting to escalate the speed by which you have to adapt. And it's with that speed of adaptation, then how do you roll things out at a more fast pace that can keep up with it and doing things incrementally? And I think that's from a technology perspective where you start moving into the DevOps realm, where you start doing multiple deployments throughout the day. There's one stat that Amazon, Walmart, a lot of the cloud providers Azure, they're doing thousands of deployments a day. If you think back just 5 years ago, most people did a quarterly release, an annual release. Now they're doing thousands of releases a day. So how do we get that feedback from a customer, tweak it, and roll it out tomorrow, so that that experience is always changing and it's always being enhanced? And they realize, and if they go back and look 6 months, they might say, wow, this actually looks totally different than what it did today. But they don't see it because we're progressing with them over time as they become more comfortable, as they start learning the new tools, as they get exposed to other tools that are coming in from InsurTechs, from people that are outside that are presenting new means by which to communicate and which to interact.
Tom, it looks like you were eager to jump in there, so I'm going to ask you to your
I was
opinion.
nodding a lot because everything Tim said really resonates with our experience at Novark as well. With the aging average age of an agent being somewhere around 60 years old, we're seeing less resistance now. In the past, there may have been resistance to going with more digital tools and digital information. A lot less resistance now because, like Tim said, a lot of them are on digital communication with their grandchildren and others. We've all learned how to do all those capabilities. I think another opportunity, though, is a better opportunity to know the customer, the end customer, the policyholder, and also the agent. But in terms of the customer, being able to personalize products through having digital interactions, not just looking at it as, I know an early phase of digitalization and in insurance was to provide documents digitally and use that as a channel. Now there's more of an expectation because of the way digital tools have rolled out in other industries and also in insurance, the expectation of doing more digital interaction. So inputting in forms as well as receiving documents back, having digital processes that take advantage of the digital tools rather than just sending information, but having an interaction of information. I think Tim mentioned before the whole idea of pre-filling forms, using third-party data that's available now to be able to pull that in and make a more personalized experience for the customer. So those are all great opportunities for the insurance.
100%. I mean, everybody's on the lookout for ways to grab those new customers to make the existing customers feel comfortable. So keeping those points in mind, a key challenge in the move to digitizing the insurance customer experience is that digital adoption strategy. So Angie, what are some of the tactical actions that insurers can take to drive a digital adoption with customers and prospects?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Layla, because we know that pre-COVID there was certainly a struggle to achieve digital adoption. I think COVID has actually helped with that because, as we've all said, grandma has even learned how to use Zoom, and so we're really being forced to do things that perhaps wouldn't have happened otherwise. So if we're going to talk tactics, I think there are a couple of things. If you're still printing documents and mailing them, so if you're printing invoices, the invoices are a good example, put a QR code on that document so that someone can scan it with their phone and then it takes them to your beautiful digital experience. Because that then starts to instill in them the value that you're bringing through that digital channel. Our experience has been that if you just take the same information that you put on a piece of paper and you send it to somebody over email, or even you provide it to them through a portal, but it's exactly the same information presented in the same way with no value add, their ability or their likelihood to adopt to that is very low. And so if you want an adoption of your digital channel, not only do you have to get people to start using it, but you have to provide them additional value so that they will continue to use it. So the start using it tactic could be QR code drives them to your digital channel. You're not going to get the adoption that you're looking for unless you also are providing additional added value in that digital asset. So the ability for them, a good example is QR code on my bill that takes me directly to the payment portal so that I can action what you want me to do on that bill. You want me to pay it? Great. I scan this thing, I can pay, I can do it all on my phone. I didn't have to log in. It makes it easy and seamless for me. So the experience is great. So that's one example or one tactic. The other one is, again, if you're printing things, there's a cost savings associated with the elimination of that print. So share the cost savings with your insured. So if it's going to save you $5 a month for them to go digital and one, get a better experience through the digital channel, it reduces your costs, reduce their costs by a little bit, or incentivize them in some way. Offer a free device. You know, if you're talking about home insurance, for example, a device to monitor your water heater for water coming out of it or whatever. So there's tons of offers that you could make, but incentivize them by sharing that cost savings that you're going to get. I think, though, the important thing is when you get them to your digital channel, it has to be a better experience than they would have gotten on that piece of paper.
And Angie, to that point, I think one thing is using the technology is that when you want to make the customer sticky, and so the only way to make them sticky is to have that interaction, that relationship with them. And while inherently we all say we don't want someone tracking us and knowing what we're doing, actually we really do, because if I use that QR code and I go in and I can see that, you know, John Smith always clicks this button and then clicks this button and then clicks this button to get to this page. Well, if I see that John Smith does that every time, why don't I just put that click at the front so he only has to do one click?
One
now, again,
thing.
you might think he's tracking me, but actually we kind of like that, because when you go in, it's like, oh, I just got to click that. Now, John Pettit, he might not like that. He might do 5 clicks. So if you really can tailor the experience to the individual by knowing the customer that we've kind of talked about, it is going to create that sticky customer, because the friction goes away. And
Exactly.
Why would I want to go to one site or use one insured or company if I've got to, it takes me 5 minutes to do something, whereas someone else kind of can know what I want to do and take me there faster and get the job accomplished.
Yeah. John, you want to jump in? Yeah,
I'd say we also have to look at the frequency of the interactions between the consumer and the particular insurance company. And, you know, while we're all entrenched in understanding this, because that's really the area that we're specializing in, we have to recognize that, look, consumers don't, you know, think every day and every hour about how they're going to do a digital transaction with an insurance carrier. They're off doing their real life, and then they come and say, oh my gosh, now I got to deal with this, right? So the infrequency of their use needs to be contemplated in terms of how you're actually allowing these people into the system, right? And so in some cases, I'll give you an example. So some of the larger insurance companies that are in the personal auto space, they really want to push telematics, right? And obviously during COVID, that's become a very, very topical thing. And so, well, if you just put the product out there from a telematics standpoint and expect people to actually take it without truly understanding what the impact is to them, they're going to be like, why am I going to do that? And, you know, obviously now more information is out there of why it makes sense in certain cases, but there was a certain large carrier that put out, you know, let me put out a small video, all right, in addition to when somebody's actually signing up for this, to give them the real value proposition that that carrier actually provides. Because otherwise you're, like Tim, I think you'd said in the past, you're at a race to the bottom, right? If you're just commoditizing the particular products that you offer over the digital channel. And so this carrier basically said, I'm going to put a video out there. It's going to be very short, but very concise, telling these particular customers what they're going to get out of the digital experience or purchasing that product. And just by doing that, they were able to increase their particular new business rate by about 20% in that particular product line. So I think the ability to educate the consumer in a very, very concise way allows them to have better interaction and really be able to embrace the fact that there's now a digital opportunity to be able to interact with an insurance company.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of all said something about what really resonated with me was that people are used to seeing targeted ads, right? You know, you say something and you talk to somebody, and then all of a sudden that piece of information that you were looking for kind of shows up on your Facebook or whatever. And so it really, like, people are used to that now. So if you can drive that sort of technology, it's still going to be very, it's going to be very helpful for people to really understand how to get into their insurance pieces. So it sounds like we just need to understand kind of what the customer needs to drive them to digital adoption. So I did mention earlier, right, that excellent customer experiences lead to increased revenue, retention, and brand loyalty. Tom, how can insurers track and report on their customer experience efforts? Because it's really great to talk about it, but it would be really nice to see some actual metrics, right?
Yes, and kind of building on what we were just talking about, I think one of the things that insurers tend to struggle with is that they have their process and they've built their processes and building new digital processes from the inside out. They're looking at what they need to do with the policy and with the customer information, and then building a process for the customers to interact with that. And in a lot of cases, they need to take the outside in approach. Well, in every case, they need to take the outside in approach. Look what the customer needs, and what's going to drive them to use that system and to choose that insurer first. So in terms of measuring all that, our research has showed that most insurers are measuring user satisfaction and Net Promoter Score, which is something they've been measuring for a long time. But and some are looking at digital traffic and website type metrics, but very few of them are tying their customer experience, user experience efforts directly to revenue and retention. And in a lot of cases, like you mentioned in the question itself, it's thought that those will be improved. But if we're not measuring that, we can't tell what kind of improvement we've received. We also, you have to recognize, I mentioned putting the digital strategy together and having the outside-in approach. Strategies themselves don't have an ROI, and in and of themselves are not something that you measure. But the projects that support those strategies can be measured. And in most cases, you can find metrics that can relate it back to the final revenue and retention type scores that you need to track those kind of projects with. But then also, let's see, I lost my thought there for a second. The other thought was that not many of the insurers are measuring these things before they start the projects. So they'll look at, they put their digital strategy together, look at things like retention and revenue, and not relate them to how the project is changing that, and not looking at the other measures that they should be looking at, and getting the baseline for actually doing the projects and seeing what kind of results they got. So that's a few thoughts about measuring customer experience.
Yeah, you can't know if you're getting better if you don't know where you started from, right?
Right, exactly.
Angie, you want to join in?
Yeah, thanks, Layla. So I totally agree with Tom. You don't know if you don't know, right? If you, and I think the key to that is a couple of things, right? It's identifying what you want to measure up front so that you can make sure that you're going to be able to track it. And then having technology that will let you do that tracking, right? So I think some carriers sometimes run into that technology wall a little bit of I have built this, or I'm building this strategy and I have projects that are going to support that strategy. But as I'm looking at my my core systems that'll be used to implement that strategy, I realize I can't actually track and report on the things I want to track and report on. We believe things like open rate and click-through rate are interesting, but not all that useful. What you really want to be able to do is see when somebody opens that browser and navigates to your digital asset, where do they spend their time? Do they spend their time on the upper left-hand corner 80% of the time, and they never go to the bottom right-hand corner, for example? Then maybe you need to eliminate what's in the bottom right-hand corner, or change it to something else, or make it more appealing, or so if you can begin to identify those behaviors either through kind of heat maps on assets, or a lot of ways to do it, but you need technology to help you do that. If you can begin to identify what's interesting to my consumer about this digital asset, then you can start making it really wonderful. And as Tim said, that small incremental changes begin to add up and manifest themselves into great customer experiences.
Right. And they look completely different, right, from what they started out as.
Yeah.
Angie, to your point, talking about kind of the design, I don't think people appreciate enough, like we're saying this CX. I think a lot of times people don't appreciate that there's actually a discipline out there in design, that people's brain work a certain way. And if you just get a developer, someone that might be a graphic artist that thinks, okay, I'm going to lay it out here. There's actually psychological means by which people process information and where they see it. Do they go to the top left? Do they go to the bottom? And I think if you want to build a really excellent experience, you really need to bring in those experts that are CX designers that know the psychology behind. And then, to your point, if you start tracking, you say, oh, you know what? Yeah, our sample group is a little bit different than the larger population. We're going to switch this slightly, but instead of going to what someone thinks is a really pretty looking page that seems logical to them because they've just been, and I'm a developer at heart myself, but no, this is how I would do it. So this has to be the right way to do it. There is that discipline of having a CX designer to kind of go in there and say, no, this is how the brain works. This is how you want to lay this thing out.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Yeah. All right, so before I move on to the next question, I just want to reiterate, if you do have any questions while we're going through this, please feel free to ask them. So we've talked about a lot of great things, a lot of great options, but on top of these points, we're looking for those quick customer experience wins. So let's talk about speed. Speed has consistently been a differentiator for carriers. So John, how are technology solutions enabling insurers to compete and also win?
So I'd say speed is a consistent differentiator for carriers in both ways, meaning the good and the bad, right? So you've got some that really aren't moving very quickly, and then you have the ones that are really light years ahead of some others. And so when you look at the technology and solutions that insurers need to compete to win, really the first thing that you have to understand is the flexibility of the underlying core. Right, if the flexibility of that core isn't there to be enabled from a digital standpoint to take advantage of some of those things that are out there today, they're going to suffer from not being able to be responsive to the customer. So let me explain that a little bit more. So if your particular core system has a digital layer that is enabling you to be able to have APIs called or call APIs and doing it in a very, very fluent way, you're going to have the ability to take into some of the things that Tim was talking about, right? Or that Tom was talking about. The pre-fill of information, right? There's a plethora of information out there that's available for different lines of business, whether it be privately held company information that comes from the IRS that's available, whether it be property information that comes from all of these different filings that people make to do constructions on their homes or commercial buildings. All that stuff is available. But if you don't have the underlying flexibility to really accommodate the ingestion of that information, you're not going to be able to provide the customer with the most effective customer service or the agents with the most effective way to ingest that information and get a quick quote out, as opposed to others. And so it's not only in terms of the pre-fill of data, but it's also, like Tim had said, the ability to incorporate other types of things like machine learning on top of the acceptance of that information. Maybe I can avoid a whole set of information I usually ask to a customer because they've answered these questions in a certain way, right? So all of these things really require the flexibility of the underlying systems to be able to do that. If you don't have that, you really need to think about it, because otherwise you're going to be in a situation where you've really got a lot of these newer insurers that are coming out there today that are really focused. They're challenging existing legacy companies. I shouldn't say legacy, but existing carriers to push them to say, okay, how are we going to respond to that? And so you really need to think through what you're going to do from that underlying technology perspective in the core to be able to adopt some of these things from an outside standpoint.
John, to tag on to that, it is the speed, but what we always say at Harper Mutual is we're not interested in growth. We're interested in profitable growth. So just because you can do something faster, you kind of alluded to it, that we can get this information out there to get a quote out there faster for an insured. We want to make sure that we actually understand what the risk is. So just by going in and saying, okay, we're just going to get the person's name and we're going to give them a quote for, we only do commercial, but for a bot policy, well, you know what? Yeah, we'll probably quote that, and we're probably going to get claims out the wazoo that it's going to be unprofitable. So how do we make sure that we get the right data, that we can consume it quickly, but also give you that speed of going through? And again, using APIs and whatnot in order to pull things in as information or as services become available are extremely important.
I'd say that there's a set of capabilities out there that are going beyond just what you find in the traditional, even on the profitability side, on the rate making side, where you're able to actually utilize the information that you've had and go through a machine learning process to really narrow down, decide what are the more profitable pieces of business that I need to go for going forward. But doing the modeling is not enough, right? Now you've done the modeling, now you have to actually operationalize it. How are you going to get that and take advantage of that within the system so that you can actually reap what you're talking about, Tim, in terms of profitable business and avoiding those things that you're being adversely selected against?
That's a great point. Those are two of the ways that insurers add value, or that you just mentioned, were better managing the risk and then also growing the business and growing it profitably. There's a third area, and that's being more efficient in operations. So I think technology also helps with that as well. We often say at Novarca that cyborgs are better than robots. We think technology and technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence are best used. They can be used for straight-through processing and increasing speed for operations, but they also are very efficient at helping humans and manual processes to have better information and be able to make better decisions. So the whole that triad of value, first of all, growing the business and growing profitably. Second one being managing risk better, and then also more efficient processes. Technology is able to enable all of those.
All right, well, it sounds like we've got some really good winning strategies to improve customer experience. This discussion so far has been like really wide ranging, really great. So I do want to take a couple of questions. So again, third time's the charm. Feel free to ask us any questions by typing into the chat area. I'm going to ask the first question, and it is, what role will innovational technologies such as chatbots and AI play in creating a seamless customer experience in insurance? I'll throw it out to the group.
Well, we're seeing chatbots in particular being used for providing simple customer service information and doing simple operations with the end policyholders and also with agents. So being able to provide information a little bit more directly and interactively, not so much on a more sophisticated scale of actually taking in applications and things like that, but also being used internally at insurers to better manage the customer service side so the customer service agents can have the information at their fingertips when they need it. For artificial intelligence, we're seeing better input of forms. There's been a lot of activity in insurtechs for inputting intelligent input of forms, and also for analysis of customer behavior. So technology, the insurtechs and the whole insurtech revolution over the last few years has really brought a lot of these technologies to the forefront, and a lot of insurers are now taking advantage of it.
I found that chatbots in and of themselves, I mean, how many times has anyone been online and they got the little chat with us now? You click the chat bot, it's like, I got a question about X, and it says, oh, can I help you with Y? No, it's not. You realize that chatbot is really a stupid chatbot. So having AI behind that chatbot that can actually, again, we're talking about experience. So if just because I got a little chat now, if I get frustrated chatting to you, that's not gonna be the experience. So how do I have kind of that AI chat bot that I think is pretty more relevant, that can answer the questions that are germane to the individual? And if it can't, it knows immediately that I've got to pass it on to a human that actually walk through the issue and talk to them. So just saying you have a chat bot, I actually think is probably detrimental, because odds are you're going to frustrate as many people as you are please individuals. But if it is just a quick question that you've got a claim and you just want to say, hey, I've got this claim. Why do I even need to tell you what my claim number is? If I know who you are and I know in my system who you are and you have a policy and you have a claim, why do I need to ask you to type in your claim? Why can't, yeah, I see you've got this claim. Is that the right claims? Oh yeah, you know what? It's currently, we're sending an adjuster out to look at that. Or now in this new world, we don't send adjusters out. We've actually got a drone, or we've got a satellite that's actually looking at that damage for you, and we're going to tell you where you are in the process. We're going to electronically just distribute the funds to you. So I think chatbot in and of itself isn't the holy grail that it may have been previously. And I think the other challenge with the chatbot is now we're all kind of 24/7. So if you do have that chatbot and it is an intelligent chatbot, and I'm a business owner and I shut my restaurant down, well, that's probably a bad example these times, but I shut my construction company down at 5 p.m. at night. I'm going to get online at 9 o'clock. I want to be able to talk to somebody. So again, it's that knowing the customer, making sure they've got that experience, that we all want to have that experience.
So I would say, Layla, there's a new trend out there, which is actually being able to go into what Tim was saying, which is almost an eerie experience where people are monitoring you all the time. It's change in lifestyle, right, or change in business operation. Ordinarily, from an underwriting perspective, you pay attention to the risk 90 days before the effective date and when it comes up for renewal. All right, but in between that time, you're really relying upon the particular insured to communicate, whether it be through the agent or themselves, what's transpiring. But what you're finding now is there's certain organizations that are able to identify what those lifestyle changes might be for individual consumers or for companies, and be able to proactively respond back to the carrier to say, look, so-and-so just got married, or so-and-so just had a child, or this company wound up purchasing this building in this particular area. And being able to get that risk and exposure information in almost a real-time fashion really changes the dynamic there in terms of the responsiveness that they have to the customer. And we were kind of joking about this a couple of days ago in the pre-call. You know, it's really anticipating what that is before it actually happens, right? The ability to say, you know what, I can respond to this thing very, very quickly. I kind of likened it to one point where, you know, one of my experiences was when I worked at Chubb, and we used to say we'd pay the claim before it came in. All right, you know, really having that anticipation, and these types of things from a technology perspective, innovation are going to drive a lot of different changes that happen from a product perspective.
Well, and I think that's about the marriage of technology and data, right? So you can have a great chatbot, but if it's not smart because it doesn't have the data to respond effectively, it's not going to be a great chatbot. I mean, you can have a great technology piece, but if it doesn't have the data that makes it smart, it's not going to satisfy the requirement. And even that anticipation, if you don't have that information, there's no way that you can effectively build an experience where people are going to feel like, wow, you really know me. I mean, I think that's the experience that you're looking for, right? You want your consumer to go, they really know me. They understand me. They know what I want.
Sometimes,
And
otherwise it'd be called a stalker.
yeah, exactly. There is a fine line, no doubt. They know enough about me to give me an experience I want, but I don't think they're stalking me.
It is a razor thin line, razor thin line. All right, so next question, let's look at this. For each panelist, what is your #1 CX action insurers should invest in? Who wants to kick it off?
I'll say what I said before. Really, it's making sure that you get the accessibility to the core so that you can take advantage of those things outside. Independent of that, I think you're going to be, you know, swimming upstream in terms of trying to compete against others.
You know, I'm a big fan of start small and iterate quick, or fail fast and pivot, one of the two. And so I would say, you know, define your strategy for customer experience and digital delivery, and then pick a small win. Pick one little thing that you think you have the technology, the people, and the process to do, and then go laser focus on that one thing and get it done and measure your results, because that will drive a behavior of cultural change that you can build on as you go through your strategy with more and different projects.
Well, Angie just kind of stole mine, so I'll add to that.
Sorry.
As you're looking at your strategy, look at your data strategy as well. Notoriously in insurance, there's a lot of bad data. Making sure you have a good strategy for how you're going to leverage that data, make sure it's used properly, make sure it's stored properly and protected. Having a good data strategy goes along with having an overall customer experience.
So I think in my mind, it relates to where, from a technology perspective, where you are, and from a business perspective in the rollout. So everyone has core systems, and your core systems are your billing, claims, policy. So where we are in our journey, we've rolled out a billing system. We've just rolled out a new policy system. We're now starting to investigate a claim system. So we believe we've kind of started, to Angie's point, smart incremental responses in some of those first billing in the policy aspect. So where we're really going to start put a lot of emphasis is on that claim side, because really the most interaction you have with a customer is that claims experience. So, you know, and COVID has actually given the industry somewhat of a black eye, because you'll hear, you know, well, I've been paying these premiums and now all of a sudden you don't want to cover me, even though if you read your policy, you'd see that, you know, it's not covered under that thing. And if you did want to cover it, and ironically, there was a company, I can't remember which, back in around 2008, they actually came up with a pandemic policy, but nobody bought it. So they stopped selling it. So, you know, it's that claim experience that if I'm giving you money and the only time I interact with you is when I actually need your services, that's where I think you're really going to make the impact on that customer experience. Because if it's a good experience of paying a claim that's justifiable in the proper amount, I think that's where someone can say, yeah, you know what, I'm being treated fairly, I'm being treated quickly, and my needs are being met. And I think so that's where we're actually going to, our next focus from that CX perspective is really going to be on that claims aspect, to make sure that as we roll out a new claim system, that whole experience from CX is going to be as seamless and frictionless and pleasant as possible.
Okay, so have accessibility to the core, fail fast and pivot, have a good data strategy, and make sure that you're able to provide positive customer experiences. Did I get that? Did I get it all? Okay. All right, next question. What is your experience regarding next best offers in customer care channels, mixing sales and service?
So I'll take it from a different perspective. Let me take it from a claim standpoint. One of the things we found is that when you go through the FNOL process, the first notice of loss process, generally you have a very, I'll call it, static set of information that you're requesting from a particular insured. And some of that stuff may or may not be applicable based upon a particular type of policy that somebody had or the incident that they were involved with. And so from that standpoint, we've developed certain things internally for our customers that allow to do the next best action, right? So if we answer these particular questions, don't go and show them the rest of these things. We have enough information by which we can take an action and go and deliver that to the claims adjuster or to somebody else that needs to be involved in that claim process. But, you know, I think that's a very effective thing on the FNOL side. I think, Tim, you probably dealt with that also on the policy side and some of the systems that you've rolled out too.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. How can digital channels advance managing return to work and workers' compensation while providing an enhanced experience? Let me read that again. Sorry, I paused in the wrong spot. Okay. How can digital channels advance managing return to work and workers' compensation while providing an enhanced experience?
Let's see.
So I think one of the things about digital, and Tim mentioned it earlier, is speed. Right? You know, so if you are traditionally mailing things to people, or you're expecting them to pick it up in their offices, you know, so if you were anticipating that, so we're talking about workers' comp, right? So if you're sending things to a business and you're expecting the employees to be handed a piece of paper that relates to that information, they're not there, right? They're not in that office. And even if they're returning to that office, maybe they're not returning in full force, and there's all kinds of strategies around returning to work. So I think digital allows you to just completely cut that channel off and deliver the same information, but differently, perhaps in a better way, with more information and a better experience, but also probably most importantly, quickly. Because many times that information is pretty timely. People need it in their hands. The old way they used to get it through their mailbox in the office, it's not there anymore.
Yeah, so I guess I would say on the, you know, when you take a look at the settlement of these particular claims or the speed up the ability to respond through a digital channel, one of the things that's been very helpful to insurers is actually the embracing of this teledocs or these other organizations that are providing over the video assessments as it relates to people's injuries. Right, given the situation that we're in right now, it's very difficult to find, getting into a doctor's visit or getting to some, PA to be able to do an assessment as it relates to what this injury was and what some of the courses of action should be. So by embracing these particular video technologies as it relates to medicine, you're able to see these things move more forward. Now, obviously, now it's just trying to keep pace with the stuff that comes in. But I think now it's opened up an opportunity from a digital perspective to be able to deal with these things in a much more effective way.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Okay. All right, so one of the things that was mentioned during the conversation was around APIs. So can you give more insights into how the adoption of this technology enables carriers to remain relevant?
To remain relevant, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
I think the context of talking about APIs and microservices and those architectures earlier was around speed and being able to provide the best capabilities that are available. I think those are the two ways that insurers are using the most. So that would be part of the answer, at least.
I tend to think about APIs and microservices too as a way to compartmentalize a piece of functionality. And it almost then allows you to kind of future-proof that piece of functionality, right? So you can do work inside of it, and as long as you don't change the front door, as long as you don't change the API, then the consuming applications don't have to change, right? So it allows you to break what we used to think about it, these big monolithic applications, break it down into bunches of little pieces, hook them all together. Each of the little pieces can go on their own journey from a development perspective, and they won't impact the others. So that gives you greater agility, it gives you greater speed, it gives you the ability to unhook one thing and hook another thing in if you need to replace the widget you're using to deliver a certain function. But APIs in and of themselves don't give you that flexibility. It's really the architecture of splitting things out into small little pieces that you then consume through an API.
And Angie, kind of you mentioned microservices. So I think one thing, I'm not sure exactly where the question, what it's trying to really get answered, but so API or application program interfaces, how does one system talk to another? You break it up. One thing that has become much more relevant with everyone going remote is security. So also, as you have APIs and as we start transitioning to microservices, and basically what a microservice is, it's a small little program that's going to run is how do you connect all these different pieces together that need to communicate to one another, but I have to make sure that no one's breaking into any of those little pieces. So I've got, at a high level, I've got an API that talks to I've got a login that talks to an API that then looks up the policy. How do I make sure no one actually circumvents the front page, talks to the API to see the policy to get your information? So as we start from a technology perspective, incorporating security within those microservices, it is an architectural discussion and it is actually very complex. And you can't go in at light hand and just say, okay, I just have to open it up and I'm going to let anyone talk to this system, because people are going to try and break in. Every time there's a door, there's another access point that someone's going to try and break in. So how do you really bolt on deadlocks to each of those doors and assure that only those individuals are going through that door should get in that door? So microservices are actually, I'm getting a little geeky here, but it's actually a really exciting area that we're going to start transforming into, that we are going to have these smaller subcomponents of functionality that you're going to start just having a basket of all these microservices that actually that basket is a system and it's going to have to talk to one another. But again, to the point of the APIs is if you can break things down into smaller pieces, even from an enhancement perspective, I can enhance something if I'm only dealing with, and I'm showing my age, but you had a 1,000-line of code application. Well, if I've only got a 10-line code of application, it's a lot easier to tweak that thing than the 1,000-line. It's a lot easier to just test that one thing. So, the APIs for microservices will enable you to move faster, but they in and of themselves are not the solution.
It's architecture.
Yep.
And I don't want to be long-winded here, but let me just say, like, to the question about the relevancy, right? And sure, remaining relevant as it relates to that. You know, I'd be disingenuous if I said that, you know, oh, if you don't have APIs, then you're going to be completely, you know, run out of business in the next 10, 15 years. Look, it really depends upon the structure and the particular strategy of the organization. If you're a low-cost provider from an insurance perspective, and really that's where you do really well, then maybe the advancement of APIs isn't really going to affect you because you're really focused on the cost. Now, on the other side of that one, depending on how large you are, you might find that the APIs are the things that are actually giving you the ability to reduce that cost, right? Where you used to do a lot of manual processes before, now you don't have to do that because you can reach out and pull that particular information in. So again, I don't want to say that it's one or the other. It really depends upon the situation. This is a consulting talk, right? It depends. But you really need to look at the specific situation in which your organization is in to see where those APIs would make you relevant or not relevant. And so, you know, just a different thought here.
No, that absolutely makes sense. All right, so we have time for one more quick question. So with the majority of carriers focusing on digital transformation and CX, how can insurers stand out in terms of customer experience? Oh, this is a good one to leave for 1 minute. Okay, let's go.
So I'll give it just a 15-second response to that. It's just not the technology. It's just not the experience. It's the culture of the company. So John mentioned that alluded to, you know, if a product becomes, or an industry becomes a commoditized industry, it's a race to the bottom. Everyone's just going to do. So how do you make sure? So we at Hartford Mutual, we believe it's that experience. So it's not only just that one of those channels is actually a video channel. It's a relationship channel that you have that. So you can't just think that you're going to get away from people. You're going to get away from relationships. That it's just, I'm going to shoot you something. You're going to say yes, and we're good. And I'm never going to talk to you again until next year when I want you to renew. You know, so I think it is one component in the building of the relationship, but that relationship is on the culture and the individual that you actually deal with that embody that culture that you as a company or a carrier are trying to exude.
That's perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Tim. All right. Looks like we are at time. And I just want to say, if you asked a question that we didn't actually have time to get to, we will reach out to you in the next day or so with a response. And then also, if you have any questions that came up that you didn't get to ask, feel free to reach out to us at info@ghostdraft.com. We will connect you with the right person or the panelist who will be best able to answer your question. I am so thrilled. This was a great experience. Thank you all so much for joining us. And I just want to give a special shout out to all of our panelists. It was amazing amounts of insight and experience, and it was fantastic. So thank you all so much. Have a great day. Cheers, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.